Infrastructure in the car segment will be motivated through different factors. In two-wheeler segment, you will not require that much of an infrastructure. In three-wheeler segment, for right now, swapping would do. And of course, right now, the charging points are quite substandard. So swapping would do. In the public transport segment, a different kind of infrastructure and infrastructure impetus would be needed, and commercial vehicles will require something else.
So, welcome to the Blue Circle. Thank you very much. It's such a big privilege and a pleasure to reconnect with everyone, our distinguished panelists who are handpicked because of the think input and the rich experience that they bring in. And thank you to our distinguished audience for joining us today. We've received over 300 plus registrations, most of whom are CEOs, CXOs, and senior leaders. Many of them are our members and repeat visitors to our webinars, so which is very encouraging and motivates us to provide higher levels of dialogue through the online modes as well. So for those of you who are new with us today, the Blue Circle is an exclusive community and ecosystem which is curated for business leaders across 6 sectors, which are e-mobility, healthcare, energy, real estate, logistics, and aerospace and defense. In, we also present socioeconomic insights from time to time, which ultimately determine the evolving complexion of the market. In response to the COVID challenge, the Blue Circle has also accentuated its digital presence. One of the many modes we employ is our weekly webinar series and our digital publication. In addition to this series, and you will be happy to know that we're very soon launching an exclusive digital platform which is curated for leaders, somewhat like the sector-specific LinkedIn for leaders, wherein we will present them with the opportunity of connecting with people just like them, also house high-quality curated content like the ones we have and the ones which we will have today, have such meaningful conversations and give access to business opportunities for leaders across these sectors. So those leaders who are interested, please do write to us. We've already begun our selective outreach and have over 3,000 leaders who signed up in the last couple of months. Today, we are privileged to have distinguished industry leaders join in for our e-mobility circles discussion. They're here to discuss the future of electric cars, product pricing and infrastructure. Mobility is rapidly evolving and electric cars are at the forefront of this change, expected to dominate the way we travel in the future. India's electrification journey will be shaped by the concurrent evolution of 3 elements, which are product, pricing, and ecosystem. What products will take off? What is the pricing sweet spot? And who will drive the charging infrastructure, government or the private sector, and how? Now, in the best interest of time, I will just briefly mention the names and designations of the panelists who've joined us. We have with us Mr. Atulya Mittal, founder Nexuzu Mobility, Mr. Inderveer Singh, founder and CEO eVage Ventures. Our session's chair and moderator is Mr. Pawan Chaudhary, author, CEO French multinational, public intellectual, leading thinker across sectors and specifically in e-mobility, and sits on several boards across the country. So welcome everybody. It's an absolute privilege to have you. Unfortunately, Mr. Suinder Gill, CEO of Hero Electric, was unable to join us today as he has fallen sick and may have COVID. So we've conveyed our best wishes to him. And now I request Mr. Chaudhary to please begin the session, sir.
Hello, everybody. And our wishes are very much with Sohinder, who has, though we have interacted only in such webinars or in some panel discussions, we really wish him all the best, and we have come close intellectually. And to start the talk, let me set a preamble for the discussion. And let me build it on 3 pillars: product pricing and infrastructure. In terms of product, the buying decision is influenced by comfort, affordability, durability, and performance. These are the factors which influence the EV buying decision. The user is influenced by ease of charging, ease of maintenance, and ease of driving. No product discussion is complete without a little bit of going into promotion. So, in terms of promotion, buyer behavior in the automobile segment is dominated a lot by the number of such vehicles on the road. If you will remember Hero Honda, in the beginning they spoke of their fill it, shut it, forget it fuel efficiency message. But soon they had 800,000 vehicles on the road. And you remember the ad they came with? Shan ki Sawari, Jandar Sawari, getting people who are existing owners to speak about their bike to the viewer. Why? Because they realize that people are not buying their bikes just because of advertising. They go to existing owners. So let us give the right words to the existing owners to speak about our bike. No problem bike. That is how they moved and they scaled. Then came Hero Puk. Hero Puk was a moped, as you remember. But there were no mopeds like that on the road. So you remember the ad which they came out with, which is very relevant to the electric vehicle segment today. Amir Khan was the spokesperson. He said, "अकेले होती है हर नई शुरुआत, जब शक्ति हो अपने पास तो जमाना देगा साथ." Kind of making a pioneer out of that buyer, understanding well that he doesn't have anything to follow. There are not enough vehicles on the road. Whom will he ask? Who will endorse? So अकेले होती है हर नई शुरुआत, जब शक्ति हो अपने पास तो जमाना देगा साथ. That is the kind of innovative buyer or innovative appeal which electric vehicles right now are going to depend on, especially to non-fleet buyers. Coming to pricing, there is a sticker price, but there is a total cost of ownership price also. And that price has to be explained to the buyer. And even the salesmen at the dealers will have to understand how to explain this long-term cost, the cost of the battery, the cost of the battery charging, how a car, an electric car, for example, gives you a life of 1600,000 kilometers, 16 lakh kilometers, and an ICE car only 300,000 kilometers. So these are the kind of permutations which have to be explained to the buyer and also trained, equipped. The salesman should be equipped with these arguments. Lastly, we discuss the infrastructure. So the infrastructure in the car segment will be motivated through different factors. In two-wheeler segment, you will not require that much of an infrastructure. In three-wheeler segment, for right now, swapping would do. And of course, right now, the charging points are quite substandard. So swapping would do. In the public transport segment, a different kind of infrastructure and infrastructure impetus would be needed. And commercial vehicles will require something else. So given this backdrop of product, promotion, pricing, and infrastructure, let me come to Inderveer and ask him what are his top of the mind comments on one or two of these segments or just one of these segments. And then I will go to Atulya on the same segment. Inderveer.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chaudhary. I think we should start with the product because a product is what defines, whatever we are doing as an industry. So we need to take into consideration certain things which are going to take place or which are taking place. It's just not the swapping of a combustion engine with a motor and vehicles are running. There are going to be far and wide changes. First, of all, we are not in the automotive industry. We are in the business of providing mobility and sustainable mobility to add to it. And when we talk about that, we need to understand, there are a bunch of inefficiencies which are there in the current mobility ecosystem. We are going more or less alone, or at best two people on a vehicle from point A to point B. Average speeds in India never cross 35 within the urban environment, but we go in a 120 horsepower car or a 150 horsepower car. Are these overbuilt vehicles actually needed in the current environment? That would be the first question we need to ask. Second is, of course, the fact that consumer behavior is changing. People are moving away from ownership, as we see. COVID is bringing need for more personalized transportation on a service-oriented platform. That's what the future would look like, right? And all these things would need purpose-built vehicles for each urban environment to mushroom out. And Atulya, our friend over here, they are the first ones to actually pioneer different product lines as a mobility company. There would be need for new mobility systems that come in, new products. It will just not be a standard swapping of the engine with the electric motor. So these are the initial changes that would come from a product perspective as far as electric mobility is concerned. Thank you.
And Atulya, what would you like to add to this? Inderveer has begun very well. He has also factored in the retrofitting piece. What would you like to add to the product piece?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Ivy. Thanks, Pavan. So I want to just build on what Inderveer just said. I think the product form factor is something that designers in the auto space have taken for granted for quite a while. And that's because the product form factor was defined by the limitations of the technology. You need a big gas tank, you need a big engine, it has to be front mounted, or in some cases, it can be rear mounted, very rare cases. It affects the handling of the car. So designers were limited. And what EV does actually, the EV technology, it kind of unleashes the creativity that we as designers, unleashes the creativity that we as designers have, right? And so designers can forget about the limitations of technology and focus on human-centric products. So why are you building a car? Why are you building a two-wheeler? Why are you building a LCV? And how do we maximize that why and make the entire product around that why? We saw this in our experience. Ivy just hinted at it, but I'll tell you what he meant when he said different product lines at Nextzoo. We started with scooters, and we saw that most of India is buying low-speed, low-end, low-cost scooters. So we thought, is that the game to get into? And we took a different approach, and instead of launching a low-end scooter, we launched a high-quality electric cycle, which can actually go longer than a low-end scooter, right? So we realized that we are in the business of mobility, as Inderveer said, and form factors are flexible here. So I'm very excited about the different form factors coming out of the market today. I'm even more excited about what kind of future form factors we're going to see. Like Inderveer has done a great job in the LCV space, right? With his efficient design, with the powertrain, with the EV technology, he's opened up additional space with which his trucks have, which is not there in an ICE comparable. So I think it's really exciting to see what kind of creative solutions we come out with in the product form factor.
Excellent, Tango. In fact, what you're saying is that because the new technology gives you more space in the vehicle, you don't have a radiator, you don't have an engine, you don't have the pistons, and you have so much more space. So there is greater freedom for the designer to develop something which is more bespoke for the user. Great point, Atulya. Inderveer, would you like to add something to this?
Yeah, I guess it covers, I think, between what I and Atulya discussed. We are bang on in terms of what kind of products would be needed. And
would you speak up a bit, Inderveer?
Yeah, sure. I'm sorry. So I said between me and Atulya, I guess we covered most of what we believe, at least the product part of the puzzle would be solved. What would be the approach, and what would happen with the flexibilities coming in? I think it would be fair we touch on how pricing will intermingle with the product now. And
what about quality and objective quality and perceived quality?
Yeah. So, one, the need for perceived quality will only increase. Electric vehicles are inherently quiet in nature. Even us and we as truck manufacturers, LCV manufacturers, delivery van guys, we are primarily dealing with the commercial segment of this ecosystem, and where we generally think that the user, in this case the driver slash fleet operator in some cases, is attuned to a rough ride, tough driving conditions, so on and so forth. I remember when we went out for our initial product review with potential customers, drivers slash fleet operators. They always felt that air conditioning was a not needed benefit. They also felt that the vehicle is loud. It's okay to live with it, so on and so forth. And now, once a product is out, they are able to identify even a small niggle in the cabin. So your fit and finish quality needs to be infinitely better than what it was initially. And then also now they've started to realize, if a vehicle can be comfortable, it can be quiet. Why not air conditioned? So the demands from the customer are going to increase infinitely, thanks to the benefits that we get from electric mobility, in terms of the drive quality, handling, pickup, etc. So the perceived quality desired is going to increase a lot for sure, and that's going to be more demanding for the designers and manufacturers in terms of quality. In terms of reliability, it's a new product, and everybody has a reliability question going on, and that would continue to be the biggest concern, or the biggest challenge new product incubants like us would face, in terms of the actual quality of the product.
Great. By reliability, you mean frequency of failure, and by quality, what you have mentioned is you spoke about the audio piece, and alongside the audio, which was just an example you gave, there you already know that there is visual quality. Of course, you know that the aesthetic quality, the geometric quality, the material quality, the surface finish. Then there is the feel quality, which means craftsmanship, and you spoke about squeak and rattle, the dynamic squeak and rattle and static squeak and rattle. If yesterday it was not important, today it is. There's a sound quality, and of course there's smell quality also. Now, it has also been seen that there are certain other aspects through which also customer evaluates quality. For example, the quality of a car is often evaluated by the sound of the closure of the door. And if it's closes, let us say, with ponderous finality, we can understand that what kind of a car it is. So these are some of the points around quality. What else do you think, Atulya, will the customer measure quality by?
Yeah, thanks, Pavan. So I think the current generation of entrepreneurs in the EV space, right? We are the lighthouse for quality right now. Inder, we've all seen that there's been a generation of EV companies that came before us, and the perception of EVs as a result was that it's a low cost, low end product. Now, the product quality that we put out there, the perceived quality, as you said, the closure of the door, for us in the two-wheeler space, it's the ride quality, right? How smooth is your ride? Do you feel the bumps? Do you feel the pebbles on the road? Do you feel the potholes? These are the perceived quality factors which customers are very easily able to distinguish between, a good quality product and a bad quality product, right? A product that's just directly imported from China, for example, where the roads are very good, versus a product that was designed for India, where we know what we're designing for when it comes to ride quality. So that's the immediate touch and feel. When a customer grips the handlebar, how does he feel about it? When he sits on the seat, when he rides, that's the perceived quality, and that's the tip of the iceberg, as you know. The imperceived quality, what we don't perceive, but we only perceive if things go wrong, is everything that's hidden, right? The strength of the chassis, the durability of your suspension system, the durability of your motor, the battery longevity. So these are a whole new set of components where EV entrepreneurs have to really drill down and focus. And there are commonalities, of course. The Honda Activa has the same handlebar, same grip, not the exact item, but the same kind of way you handle the bike versus our Dextro. But there's a whole other mess of things which we have to look at, right? The motor, for example, the wiring harness, the controller. So it's going to be really important for EV entrepreneurs to know that what we do today defines how this industry is perceived. So I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs going after scale without establishing viability, without establishing a high quality prototype, a high quality production. And now we're seeing people are changing their approach. Now the guys like EVH, like Nexu, like Ather, who have been in the garage fixing things for the last 5 years or a decade, now they're getting the right kind of attention from customers. And the guys who are bringing in lots from China and just trying to trade it, they're not getting the right kind of attention from customers. So I think quality is an iceberg. We see the tip of it as the rider or as the driver, but what goes on under the hood, under the paneling, it's very important, and entrepreneurs are paying attention now.
No, you have very, very well described this iceberg and divided it into two areas. You have said there is one objective part of quality and there is a perceived part of quality. In the objective part of quality, you have spoken about performance, you have spoken about reliability, you have spoken about durability. And in the perceived quality, you have highlighted to what Inderveer and I have focused on. And just to close this segment on quality, I would like to say that today, electric vehicles are being compared with watches. They are saying that the regular automatic or manual watch, which was like an heirloom, which was passed from generation to generation, and stories got added. It grew in character as it moved. Same thing is not going to happen for the Apple Watch which you have bought now. It won't become an heirloom. And there are certain reasons, because it is going in a particular groove, that it will not become an heirloom. And electric vehicle manufacturers right now are conscious of the fact that their vehicle should have that heirloom-like quality which some cars have, which the regular IC engine cars more often have. And they are also saying, as Sohinder also said the other day, that the referrals which you are getting, existing users, will add to the impression of quality. The roadside mechanic will tell you through his testimonial as to what is the quality of a particular genre of product. And the seconds market will also enforce or build your reputation of quality. Great points, Atulya and Inderveer. Now let us come to the pricing piece, Inderveer. In your segment, what do you think is the pricing complexion which is emerging? And feel free to comment on other segments also. Inderveer.
Thank you. So pricing is an interesting problem to solve. More than technology, this becomes ultra critical if we need to see mass scale adoption of EVs. One is the perceived value of a vehicle at the moment. There's a lot of pricing pressure because we are sort of competing with the combustion engine, and due to the cost of the batteries/cells, the initial cost is always going to be higher in the hands of a consumer. And the outlook of buying this vehicle, and we are commercial guys, so primarily we work on the TCO principle, wherein the benefits accrue over a period of time, and you get infinitely higher benefits after 4 or 5 years of using the vehicle, right? So the mindset of buying a vehicle has to move from capital purchase to TCO sort of a purchase. There should be hybrid pricing models that need to be in place. That we'll have to think out of the box as an industry as a whole, and this is a problem for the industry to solve. It's not a one or two manufacturer game over here. Like we can sort of separate the battery pack from the vehicle, which gives the ease to the consumer in terms of the uptime of the battery pack, the life of the battery pack. So there is a sort of a inclination to move towards decoupling the two components, at least in the bigger vehicles, because battery becomes a major cost component in that case. And then there would be also large scale changes in the way insurance is covered, for example. Right, EVs can provide a lot of telemetry data, which earlier was not available in normal combustion engine vehicles. Now that data can help drive down the cost of insurance. The way you drive, your driving cycle, driving hours could define the cost of insurance, the cost of your EMI/lease period. So these hybrid instruments would come in, a huge scope for fintech companies to enter here. And then from as producers and buyers, the approach to TCO has to be then passed on to the consumers. So these are the pricing related issues or changes which will come across in the industry, I feel.
Right. And what would you like to add to this? One of the interesting points Inderveer has brought, Atulya, is the decoupling of the battery pack. In fact, some car manufacturers also are doing it to reduce the load of capital investment in the inventory. They are planning to send the chassis and the rest of the car separately and maybe in greater numbers, but the batteries they will hold at their warehouses. And when the car sale gets finalized, that is when the battery moves. So roughly 50% of the cost does not become a burden on the stockist to carry the inventory. What would you like to add to what Inderveer and I have said, Atulya?
Yeah, I'll just organize some of these thoughts also the way I see it. So I'll just break it into non-controllable factors, semi-controllable factors, and totally controllable factors. And controllable by who? By the EV OEMs and the ecosystem, right? So non-controllable is how the customer perceives the product pricing, right? We can't tell the customer, look, go for TCO, don't go for sticker price. Because even I, as a customer today, when I go to buy something, I look at the sticker price. No matter how much I try and do the TCO calculation for subscription services or for video services or whatever, I still think of sticker price, even for an EV car, actually. So I have a hybrid and I couldn't get myself to think of TCO, but I thought, okay, we are an EV, so we should have hybrids. But sticker price, TCO price, we will not be able to change consumer psychology over a short term. Semi-controllable is the economics. So every business needs to make a profit. Our pricing is a function of our cost. We can control some of the cost. Technology is helping us by driving down the battery price. This will continue to happen as more and more investment flows in. And as companies like ours scale up, our overheads will get apportioned over a larger volume. So that's semi-controllable, right? Battery costs are going down on their own because of others. We can control our overheads by scaling up properly and managing our margins. So that's semi-controllable. And what I think is a more interesting piece, what you both touched upon, is the totally controllable factor, right? And that's where innovation will come in. Today, the automobile industry, the ICE automobile industry, is very similar to the razor and blade industry, except the car companies are selling you the razor and the gas companies, petrol companies are selling you the blades, right? Together, they work very well. In EV, we're coming out and saying that, look, you're not going to have to pay for petrol. You'll pay a very marginal cost for electricity. You're going to have to not pay for servicing. Basically, these cars are like gadgets. They run till they run. And then after a shelf life, after a run life, you have to replace certain things. But the total cost of servicing is much lower. So as we're disrupting this, we have to figure out what is a model that will work. And we've seen the shaving industry getting disrupted by subscription models, right? Where the cost is much lower, but they lock you in to a subscription. So they have predictability on their revenue stream and investors are able to lap that up. EVs are seeing that by decoupling the battery and by putting the battery on a subscription and selling people the kits. But customers still don't inherently take that as a good deal yet because of the first factor, which I said, which is non-controllable, customer perception. When you sell them an EV without a battery, they think you're selling them half a product. So we have still to figure out what is that innovation. And now there are things like IoT technologies where maybe you can actually sell them the entire product, take some amount of charge upfront, right? to satisfy your investors and the accountants, and then put it on a per use basis. So say per kilometer petrol would cost you 10 rupees a kilometer petrol bike. I'll charge you 4 rupees a kilometer, and you keep making, keep clipping coupons as you go along, with some kind of a commitment that you have to ride it at least 100 kilo. I don't know the numbers, but with the commitment of how much you ride it, so that you have predictability on your revenue stream. But the models right now in market haven't clicked yet, and that I think is a big opportunity for all of us. We know EV is the thing of the future. We know technology is catching up, but the pricing innovation is a totally human piece and a financing piece which we need to crack. And whoever cracks it will get their due share of the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Very good hypothesis. Now, let me ask Inderveer. Do you agree, Inderveer, with the first part of what Atulya has said? How non-controllable is the perception? Is it something which is cast in stone? Is it something which will take a finite period of time only to erase? Or can that perception be changed sooner? That is one point. And why I'm asking this question is because we need to be agile, and we cannot, I very much like what Atulya has said, so that he has given us the space to discuss this. Now let us push him back a bit. We should not allow the industry or even the dealer to think of the perception in the mind of the customer not going towards TCO as something which is frozen. How can we expedite him towards TCO, that is total cost of ownership, and also use the dealer to expedite that movement towards total cost of ownership? On semi-controllable side, the supply side, surely that is the industry has to do something. And the totally controllable side also, he has mentioned, insurance, you had also mentioned, purchase models are changing. And purchase models have made a very big difference to many industries. Like when the aircraft industry came, it realized very soon that there is no buyer for us. There's nobody who has so much money. The airline companies do not have that much money to buy an aircraft. So they came out with these financing and leasing options. And that is how they flew. Inderveer.
Yeah, thanks. And it's an interesting context you put in. I've been telling our sales teams, whenever we talk to consumers, this is the exact, idea that we put forward to everybody about, how the vehicle is changing. And we need to take a step back, understand how consumer behaviors are changing. It's, I can speak a lot about the commercial vehicle industry because at the present moment, we are in that specific, domain. It is largely running on TCO right now because a person would buy a truck, or a business owner would buy a truck, a fleet owner, for it to run for maximum number of miles, load miles in a day, and earn maximum revenue out of it. He'll always arrange for 10-20% of the down payment, 80% is financed. He assumes that the business will generate some X amount of the revenue and it'll offset the EMIs for him. That's the traditional mindset. So today, if I were to go and sell it to, say a fleet operator or a truck user himself, it's just a 20% or 30%, whatever would be the down payment is what seems to be the higher cost for him. The rest of it is anyways in a quasi-subscription scheme for him in a way. That's how the commercial vehicle industry as such is working right now. When we talk about personal use cases, vehicles for personal transportation, that may not be the case because, the user behavior is separate. There's a sense of ownership of the vehicle, is a sense of pride attached to the vehicle. And as Atulya did mention about this, I just can't say you take one pajama with half the thing there, half is not there. Nobody's going to buy that, and that's the mindset which a consumer or a personal vehicle would have, even myself. But then also, if you look at the high-end luxury European car manufacturers, most of them are started saying, guys, you give 5-10% down, and then per mile, buy a bunch of 10,000 miles annually from us, or 15,000. Above that, we charge some 15-20 rupees. So this movement of sort of moving the vehicles to a subscription slash quasi subscription model is moving around, wherein they are giving certain X amount of buyback guarantees, and trying to create these models so far. And I guess that's how it's going to be. And as far as EVs are concerned, the consumer behavior will change. We'll see there will be a lot more fleet owners buying EVs than individual buyers. Those will be the first movers. And with 1.6 million miles on a vehicle, you effectively cannot drive those million miles in even 15 years, unless the fleet owner finds a way to operate it for some 24 hours a day. It'll be difficult. So these hybrid models will come into place, and I guess the first transition would be fleets, and then personal use cases, where gamification of the subscription will take place, or similar methods will move forward.
Very good. Let us also give the mic back to Atulya to anything he would like to add to this. Atulya.
Yeah, great. Actually, I fully agree on the TCO for fleets, and that's what our initial hypothesis was when we launched the electric motorcycles. Our origin was that we were in a delivery business, and we were looking for economical solutions, and we launched a scooter company to fulfill our own need. So TCO works very well for fleet. And I was just thinking, as Inderveer was saying, to bring that into consumer, it might be a Uber-like model. So we're seeing bike taxi companies picking up. And as soon as we can offer a bike taxi company a product which satisfies their requirement, I think we could get good uptick there in terms of demand. But again, to put things in perspective, that's still B2B, right? And every OEM in the consumer space wants to eventually go B2C. So here we can look at what Tesla did and what Ather is trying to do. Is that Tesla, when it first launched the first Roadster, which had a lot of problems and batteries burning up, cars burning up, they positioned it as a sports car, which was electric, a totally unique value proposition. You couldn't get anything like that. A sports car which is electric, faster than a regular sports car, and is clean for the environment. And so they increased the value perception. And then customers were willing to pay a high amount to own that car. When they launched the Tesla Model S, again, the value perception was very high. But if you actually look at the Model S, they've taken out so much to cut costs that actually internally it's very minimalistic and very, very basic looking. But the perception was you're driving a Tesla and you're environmentally friendly and it's a very fast car. And Ather is doing that in India, right? They're positioning an electric two-wheeler as a very, very high-end gadget. And they're trying to capture that gap between perceived value and cost. And I think, kudos to them. I sincerely hope they succeed and push the industry forward. So I think one area where we can figure out how to get customers hooked, even as the industry catches up and costs come down and prices come down, is how do we increase the perceived value to the consumer? And I think Inderveer hinted to that. There's a pride factor associated to the vehicle. So maybe that's one area where you push, right? You you make something very good looking, take all the things that the customer, your target customer actually wants, eliminate the things they don't want and increase the perceived value. And then they'll pay that higher sticker price because then they're getting something for that.
Absolutely. Very well put. In fact, pride of ownership, innovation, as we spoke of in Amir Khan saying, "Akele hoti hai har nayi shuruaat." That spirit of being a pioneer. And also the regulations and incentives. The regulations will also push because this is related to clean energy. And incentives, the demand side incentives like separate lanes, special parkings, etc., will also help this span of electric vehicle start weighing heavier. And lastly, I feel that even the financial myopia, that you are not going for TCO, total cost of ownership, and you're only looking at ticket price, and this is financial myopia. and you should not be financially myopic, can be surely put out through interesting advertising campaigns, as has been done in other sectors, for people to change their behavior. Great points.
I just remembered something, Pawan. It'll take less than a minute.
Go ahead.
Tata Nano came out and they said low price, low price, low price, and nobody bought it because everybody thought if I buy this car, everybody's going to think I'm cheap. So you really got to make sure that you don't go for low price and you don't just harp on that. The product must be very high value to the customer.
And
then,
it is sorry, go ahead.
And then when they buy it, they should feel like, wow, I got an amazing deal. But nobody should know that.
Exactly. It is reassuring that we are closing on this note, because this is telling that the cheapest product in the market also bombed. So price is not the only reason which will decide your success or failure, and price can be perhaps jacketed in such clothes that it becomes more acceptable to the consumer. Great points. Coming to the third piece, which is the infrastructure piece. Inderveer, who will bring the charging infrastructure and what can catalyze it and how? Inderveer.
Thanks. So essentially, charging is a problem solved segment-wise. We will have, two-wheelers, three-wheelers have a certain way of, moving towards the charging, solving the charging puzzle. The bigger battery packs like buses / commercial vehicles, they would have a different approach, and personal use vehicles would be different. So if we talk about personal use vehicles, I think more than 80-85% of the vehicles are either charged at home or office, which is a fairly easy solvable part of the puzzle, right? The bigger issue would be then for regular use two wheels for either commercial purposes or something like that, fleets which run across the city, and this would then come together either through battery swapping is a good solution, working excellently for two wheelers and three wheelers. I am seeing a lot of uptake of this kind of a swapping mechanism takes place, and for the other vehicles there would be this opportunity charging infrastructure that is needed. And the government is working towards it. There'll be a lot of public-private partnerships coming across to do this kind of things. Also, the battery technology needs to mature to allow some kind of fast charging, and it's going to be a tough thing for India based on the climatic conditions we have, because battery charging is a function of the thermal efficiency of your own battery pack and vehicle. And once we move to a quicker, like the supercharger network which the Teslas have, you'll need to have the battery technology, battery pack technology to be mature enough to have these kind of technologies working together. So this is the problem which will be solved by the manufacturers. As far as the actual investments go, I think the government and the public-private partnerships are the way forward for these kind of things.
Oh, very good. In fact, what you are saying is, and let me also add to what Sohinder Gill brilliantly alluded to what you said, is you are saying that two-wheelers will be home or office charged, no problem. Three-wheelers either at home or swapping or some stations, charging stations. Cars, we are not sure, because for cars you need a very huge infrastructure, as cars also engage in long rides, and for that government really will have to step in, because it cannot be only the private sector moving in there. For commercial vehicles, what is your view, Inderveer?
See, commercial vehicle is the easier problem to solve, because commercial vehicles generally move on a fixed route, most of them at least. There are only so many pin codes in India, and each commercial vehicle will ply on those routes. And I see this with the rider, that the initial transformation would be in urban transit vehicles, not long haul vehicles, right? And that's what all the reports also suggest. You go to McKinsey's, you go to RMI, Rocky Mountain Institutes of the world, that's the recommendation that urban transit vehicles will be the first movers. Urban transit vehicle charging infrastructure easier to solve because then they traditionally run on a fixed route day in, day out. For example, your garbage collection vehicle, he will only run on a certain number of sectors / geographies within the city. And charting out your charging infrastructure to support such kind of activities is fairly easy. And the daily run for a commercial vehicle within a city is close to 100 kilometers on an average. Could be plus minus 20% based on each urban environment, but you average it out to 100. So one, you can give enough juice on a vehicle to run for the whole day. B, opportunity charging can be planned out because the routes are fixed. So it's not a uneven drive area for the vehicle that will be running onto. So commercial vehicle is a easier puzzle to solve, and can be done by the manufacturers / independent players who are coming up.
So basically, you're saying commercial vehicles and public transport will go similarly. It will be first intra-city because the route predictability is there, short rides are there, fixed charging stations are there, and that is your view. What would you like to add to this, Atulya? And after you have added to this regarding infrastructure, let me also tell you that there are very fine questions coming up. One of the questions which has come up, which I will share in detail, is regarding dealership viability, where the gentleman is asking that how will you ensure that existing dealers who are going to earn less amounts as compared to IC engine dealers, how you will take care of their interest. So first, anything you'd like to add to what Inderveer has said on the charging infrastructure, and then how do you take care of these dealers? Atulya.
Yeah, I mostly agree with what has been said on the charging part. The only thing I want to add is that there's charging infrastructure, which is, I think, a public good. It's a long gestation project and has to be done in a public way with the government or in a public-private way. But then there are charging solutions, and charging solutions play a role in your product design, play a role in your charging, charger design. And so in India, we have, for example, two-wheelers, and we realize that you can charge a two-wheeler at home, but even then, a lot of India still has blackouts, right? We wouldn't know that in Bombay or Delhi, but parts of India still have unpredictable electricity supply. So how do you compensate for that? And there it has nothing to do with infrastructure because the government can't even provide like lighting infrastructure, right? So where's the EV going to come in? So what we did is in the latest electric cycle we launched, we focused on range. We made it a 100-kilometer range product. So the product design itself solves part of the charging solution. The infrastructure will keep coming up, but like Inderveer said, he's coming up with solutions for his customers. We will continue to develop solutions for our customers. And I think as OEMs, we should forget maybe about the infrastructure because that will take time, but focus on how we make our products more like consumer electronics, where you never think about charging being a bottleneck. So that's just what I wanted to say on the charging piece, Pawan.
Great point. Also, we should, the audience is extremely well informed, see the large number that they stay with us right up to the end. So we need to tell them also that there is a new technology which is coming and already adopted in some countries, which is vehicle to grid. That means you will charge the vehicle when the electricity is there, and when the electricity is not there, if your vehicle is standing idle, it's not in use, then your vehicle can charge the grid or provide electrical power to your home. Great point. And coming to the other point, Atulya, and then I will take that to Inderveer. Atulya.
Yeah.
The dealer interest. So the question, let me just read out the question so that the readers also know. Ravi Diwan has asked, with lesser need for after-sale service, the dealership viability is under stress. With lesser volumes, most of the existing dealers are earning less amounts as compared to IC engine counterparts. How do you think this issue can be addressed? The other question which is related, and I'm preparing Inderveer also. The EV segment has lower resale value, and though there is no reason for that, despite the fact that most of the parts have reliability, can something be done to improve resale value? So first question to you, Atulya.
Yeah. So I think for about 100 years, more than that, the dealership model has not really evolved, right? So this is an industry ripe for disruption. It's just been waiting to get disrupted, and the EV enables that. So currently, as the person who asked the question rightly said, you sell a car, you make a margin. That's your first margin that you make as a dealer, and then each time the car comes in for servicing, you make a bit of a margin, right? And you keep things going. But to make this margin, you've got to invest in a big box shop, right? For high-end cars, you have to invest in a high level of company branding. You have to have large infrastructure in your back where you need to be able to fix SUVs. You need to be able to fix mini cars, whatever it is. So there's a big bit of investment that goes in as well. Then you've got to have trained manpower and technicians. So the whole model is built in a way to grab this margin from the first sale right down till when the car becomes scrap. Almost like a recurring revenue stream year on year, month on month. So in this situation with EVs, we have had so many discussions, and what we realize is that initially itself, the margins that you offer your EV dealers has to be higher by a factor of 3 to 5 times versus what they would make in selling a petrol two-wheelers, because the dealers are smart. They know that they're not going to get this car in month on month to fix something, to change oil, or to take care of small issues. So dealers are smart. They know how the economics work, and they're playing hardball with all the OEMs to make sure we give them the upfront margin. The second aspect is that we have seen big box electronics retailers in the US go out of business, right? Best Buy has been upended totally, and it's evolved its model to be a showroom where you go, you see the product, you touch and feel it, and then you don't actually buy it there. You buy it online, or they actually charge rent from the people that are showing products in their showroom. So if you see Samsung in a Best Buy, Samsung will have a corner shop in Best Buy, and they will pay Best Buy rent. And Best Buy will get all these electronics brands and take rent from them and pay rent to the landlord eventually. So they've come out with a very interesting model of how they're buying retail space wholesale and selling it at retail rates to OEMs. That might be a way where existing large dealerships can sort of start to evolve their model. So look at it more like a real estate business rather than an engineering business. That's just one of the ideas. But coming back to our philosophy at Nexoo is that we don't see ourselves as selling an EV two-wheeler or an EV bicycle. We see us as selling mobility powered by consumer electronics, right? You don't buy an Apple phone from a big showroom. You buy it online. When you have issues with it, you deal with it online. Once in a while, you may have to go to a small shop to get it fixed. And I think that's the future of EVs. You're going to buy it, you're going to keep running it. And once in a while, you might have some problems, but you won't need infrastructure all over to get that fixed. So the product architecture of EVs itself solves the biggest issue of ICE engines, which is frequent breakdowns, which has a cascading effect on what kind of support you actually need. And yes, the dealerships will have to think of a new business model.
Anything you'd like to add to this, Inderveer?
Yes, I would. So we approach this problem sort of differently at EVH, and I can speak specifically how we are trying to solve it. We are looking at mass industrialization on miniaturization. So we're trying to create these micro factories, which could be unique to each urban environment, because then the role of a dealer changes, right? From being just a seller, you go up the value chain, become assembler of the kits. And we envision EVH showrooms or experience centers to be like a IKEA store. You go, you can customize your modules which are needed. Add on to that, the dealer who's working there has the kits, assembles it, and then makes it ready for delivery the next day. That's the kind of a vision we have for EVs as far as EVH is concerned. So that sort of solves the problem of the dealer having an issue in becoming the extra margins which a dealer would ask for is justified in a way because there's a value addition that he's providing then. and then also they would work towards helping create or manage the infrastructure for running these vehicles. So the value addition would be in different segments, different methods to do it. And Atulya already said it's ripe for disruption, so it's going to go either ways. But that's how we are looking at it.
Great. And to generate income from the life cycle of the product for the dealer, McKinsey has also done a study, and it has come out with other ideas akin to the ideas which you both have made: battery boosting software pricing, advanced driver assistance systems, concierge or remote services, on-street parking information. These are also additional things which will become more and more, let me say, lucrative, because every EV is going to last 1600, or car is going to last 1600,000 kilometers as against 300,000 of IC engine. So great points on that. Coming to, I think, the second question which we received from Ravi Diwan, we have already discussed. That is regarding quality and perception of quality, and how even after, when it is a better product, more durable product, why should its perception be lesser? And that, I think, is also a matter of good branding, communication, and that can be handled. Coming to another question which has come from Srijit, who is the founder of CMB Energy. And this is for you, Inderveer. What is the scope of switched reluctance motor in India in the next 5 years? And in the same answer, please also discuss dependency of magnets in BLDC PMSM motors and its impact on the faster adoption of EV in India.
Interesting questions, pretty technical though. So one, when we talk about a SRM motor, right, it is supposed to be more efficient than the other motor geometries or factors. That's a given, but it has its own challenges in motor control. So the problem is in not manufacturing / designing a SRM motor. The problem lies in controlling it. So, and this is sort of the holy grail of EV motors, the SRM technology. If properly developed, if somebody has the right control mechanism, because it is attuned to a lot more vibrations because of the anatomy of the design, and due to EVs, we already discussed perceived quality increases, the demand from a vehicle is increasing. Can we provide that? And then torque ripples are bad for the transmission, all those things. So that is one look at it. The other way of looking at it is the BLDC and the magnets, which is the other question on this, right? So SRM is a solution to get away from the magnets, basically. And then when we talk about magnets, there are two approaches to this. You have neodymium NdFeB magnets, which are currently imported from mostly China because of the rare earth mining ban in India. But then, there are different segments of magnets which are coming up to replace these, which are available in India. But you need to do your own research and develop localized magnets with far lesser strength magnets and still try to get the right kind of efficiency. There are a lot of changes that can be made in motor design, hysteresis losses. There is the air gap that can be maintained better. So these small things can be changed to then tune it, but you'll have to pay me to give you a specific answer beyond this.
Very, 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 very good. I think we will let them connect with you directly. Coming to the last question, and then
Aman, if you don't mind, on this SRM,
go ahead.
I just want to give a different perspective on a different topic on SRM. Mm-hmm. So in there we talked about the technical side. So SRM motor is something that's super exciting globally, right? If you Google Turntide Energy, the listeners can Google Turntide Energy. It's just raised about 30 or so million funding from Bill Gates, and I think Robert Downey Jr. And they've raised in total $180 million to build just SRM motors. So when I look at these innovations, I see the kind of capital being raised for these motors. It's very exciting for me as a global entrepreneur, but as an Indian entrepreneur, it worries me because I don't see that kind of money flowing into the development of SRM motors in India. So I think the demand will definitely come for any listener. The demand is there because, as Inderveer said, it's the holy grail. But how we develop it is something that I would actually love to see when other companies globally are getting so much funding for it. And here, where we've seen the kind of investment flowing in the EV ecosystem is not that high. So if you don't mind, I'll ask a redirect to Inderveer on how he thinks this will happen.
Yeah, go ahead in the
Yeah,
video.
so we have a working SRM motor, right? We are still struggling to get the control to the right efficiency. I mean, not the efficiency, the right quality. To do it, and we are happy on a public forum, happy to interact with anybody who can provide a solution for the control. You see, motor design. If you ask me, in India, we need to really focus on a lot of academics and partnerships with the OEs like ourselves would be needed to develop these kind of technologies. There will be a need to invest in basic research. And then, Mr. Pawan, I mean, we can go on. This is a different topic altogether, how to get it running. But to cut it short, we need public-private partnerships. Investment in basic research is needed first, because, I mean, you need Lagrangian maths and Euler to actually solve these problems, which the competency levels are pretty low in India, to be honest.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely correct. But this is a very important area because lithium ion is the star child of this industry, lithium ion battery, and a disproportionately high investment has flown into lithium ion battery technology. And the motor technology that hasn't received that level of investment. And it should not so happen that the lithium ion piece gets very sharply developed and it is the motor technology piece which becomes the real pivot which will determine which vehicle or which investment will do better. And Blue Circle tells me that next month they are going to have an investor webinar on electric vehicles. So I request them to please take up this point also, which both of you have very in a timely manner pointed out. Coming to the last question, and this is from Prem Solapure. There is one more sub-segment in the EV market, which is the hybrid vehicle. Even for the existing vehicles which are already running, basically he is referring to retrofitting as well as hybrid vehicles. So how are the EV manufacturers looking at this market? Inderveer.
Yeah, so my view on hybrids is very clear, right? We have the technology to go all electric. Why do we stick in the middle, right? The cost of the vehicle anyways is going to go high. Hybrid powertrains are infinitely more expensive than electric powertrains. We are just arbitraging smaller battery with combustion engine or gas, right? Why do we do that? The time to go hybrid was in the early 2000s. We are 2 decades behind that already. Logically speaking, it's the need for all electric vehicles that'll go. Hybrids could work great for long haul, huge trucks, 50-ton plus GVWs. Maybe that's where you'll see a positive TCO on that. But if you talk about sustainability, I guess when we have the option to go all electric, why go stick in the middle for a hybrid solution?
Okay, on this, I would like to say that there are two schools of thought, and I'll quickly say that and then summarize the session. One school of thought is what is based on what you said, and a very famous CEO of Nissan, I think, also said that in the wheel, that a hybrid is like a mermaid. When you want a woman, you get a fish, and when you want a fish, you get a woman. Having said that, there is another school of thought also, which says that any innovation should be inclusive. If you are bringing chlorofluorocarbon substitutes, give some help to those companies which are making chlorofluorocarbons to find new substitutes so that they are not left out completely from the new game, like what US did and supported DuPont in through grants, etc., to look for chlorofluorocarbon substitutes, which they were actually making. The chlorofluorocarbons were being made by them. So where the potential loser is supported through some grant. Another way of bringing this kind of inclusive innovation is to phase your manufacturing. That means you do not move directly from IC engine to electric, but give an option to the hybrid makers also, and also give some retrofitting options. So these are some thoughts in the ring. Your thought also is very valid. However, to make sure that the ICE engine manufacturers are not left high and dry and they have some time to adapt to electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles are currently being seriously considered by the government also. In fact, what the government is saying, or what it is being advised, that keep your EV drive technology agnostic. Go for clean vehicles rather than electric vehicles. They can be hybrid, they can be biofuel, they can be whatever. We do not know which technology will ultimately win. And this will also make it more inclusive. So superb points. I think in a nutshell, what we can say is the automotive value chain is going a lot of disruption. There are changes in manufacturing, technology, distribution, ownership models, after sale support, and consumer behavior. And this discussion tells very clearly that we can, through our greater knowledge and exchanges like this, make this transition smoother and perhaps more inclusive. On that note, let me pass it back to Siddharth for getting this entire panel and this topic all fleshed out. And thank you both, as well as thank the enlightened audience, which has asked some very good questions, which I hope will reach you both, and which has stayed back in large numbers, like always, speaks of their interest and as well as level of information in this sector. Siddharth.
Well, thank you very much, sir. Such a deep and insightful discussion. I'm sure our leaders and we took home a lot from today's conversation, and how well moderated Mr. Chaudhary. I really wish we had more time for today's conversation. And thank you to our leaders in the audience for joining in and staying till the end, and also for always sharing excellent questions. For those questions which may have been missed out due to paucity of time, I will share the relevant ones with the leaders and request some of their time for it. Along with our weekly webinars, we will soon be taking these discussions on the exclusive mobile app, which we're curating for senior leaders soon. We are sending out invitations to select leaders across our 6 sectors, which are real estate, healthcare, energy, e-mobility, logistics, aerospace, and defense. So whether you would like to engage with us on our platform or as learners, our leaders are invited to connect with us for membership and join the e-mobility circle, and also get access to the other allied circles which we're building. So thank you once again. It's been an absolute privilege, and look forward to having more such discussions in the future.
Bye.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Bye, everybody.